6.5, 10 a.m. item, consideration of presentation from the Lake County Cannabis Alliance. And with that, it looks like this is sponsored by Supervisor Pyska. Well, I'll let you go ahead and start out if you'd like, and invite whoever needs to come up to conduct this presentation and move forward as needed.
Yeah, I thought we could have this opportunity to hear from our cannabis industry, hear about their vision, their priorities, their challenges, and just open this up for a dialogue. We haven't had that opportunity. So I'd like to invite Jennifer and Aaron McCarrick up. So you can sit up here, present.
They expressed a desire to stand? But whichever
Okay.
you prefer.
Whichever you prefer.
Do we mask or no mask? Thank you. Thank you, Chair Crandall. Thank you, Supervisor Pyska. Thank you, Supervisor Sabatier and Supervisor Scott. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about we have a PowerPoint. To talk about the state of cannabis in Lake County in California. And this is a great step in our communication with the board, with the county. As you can see, many familiar faces from the industry here in the board chambers today, people who have been at this for years, since before legalization, before all this. So very happy to continue the evolution of this conversation. Next slide. So today we're going to talk about the state of cannabis in Lake County and the state. And what we're talking about today is who we are as the LCCA, what's going on in California, what's going on in Lake County, the challenges in the market today, and the solutions and looking forward. And this is really a time to ask, how can we work together? How can we work with the county? How can we work with the community? What can we do to eradicate illicit grows? What can we do to help the legal market thrive? Next slide, please. So the LCCA was formed in 2019 after legalization. We are everyone. We are community members, mothers, fathers, school board members, community leaders, homeowners. We work with events and lobbying and social media to engage and educate. Next slide. For the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer Smith. I forgot who we are. I'm Aaron McCarrick. I have a distribution company in Clear Lake, California, and I'm the treasurer of the Lake County Cannabis Alliance. Thanks again.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Smith, president of the Lake County Cannabis Alliance, as well as a cultivator in District 1 in Lower Lake. Since 2016 in November, the voters voted to approve Prop 64 and legalize cannabis in the state of California. In 2018 was the actual implementation, and it starts with a distribution model that was created similar to alcohol, although we have a separate step. Alcohol's 3-tiered, we're 4-tiered, so it goes from the producer, the cultivator, to a distributor. That distributor is then responsible for getting it tested. We are tested to the parts per billion. Our food is tested to the parts per million. We are tested for pesticide residue, and we're tested for heavy metals, and to make sure that there's no mold or mildew in our products. From testing, the distributor then takes it to retail to consumer. Next slide. Along with creating that path to market, they created a Bureau of Cannabis Control and state-level oversight. These are just a few of the agencies that we have to get clearance from before we can get our state licenses. The water boards, we're all enrolled in the water board monitoring system. We submit reports twice a year. Metric tracks our products from seed to sale, as you've heard before. Every gram of cannabis is in this tracking system and tracked through its entire lifespan. We're responsible for background checks with live scans, and we report to the Department of Pesticide Regulation. Next slide. I think we hear a lot about the money we're generating for the state in regards to taxes, but I think what's lost in a lot of the conversation are the jobs that are created. There's state level jobs in the regulatory agencies like we just talked about. There's local government jobs in the process of regulating our industry, and there's industry jobs. And these jobs aren't just the jobs that are created on the farms, but they're created throughout the county. I think what's really important to note here is that we've spent so much time creating this false sense that you need to go to college, right? But there's not a lot of college jobs in Lake County. We want our families to be able to come back to Lake County. We want to create industry and jobs that are here, and we want to promote the trades and the skills that are needed on the cultivation side of this industry. We support local businesses. We've actually created new businesses. There's processing centers that are in empty buildings. We know about taxes. You know about the economic impact from the businesses that we're supporting. And mostly, we're looking to encourage enrichment in our community. We want people to stay here. We want to protect our rural lifestyle and contribute to that. Next slide. So here we start talking about the challenges. And everybody keeps asking why the market dip. Well, as you can see in that 5-tier system we've got, cannabis is taxed along the way at every step. We are produced at the production level. We are taxed by the state and local for cultivation. There's a state excise tax that the consumer pays. There's local sales tax that the consumer pays. The answer to this is less taxes and more retail. There's an overall reduction in access to the consumer. In 2017, prior to legalization, there was approximately 8,000 to 10,000 retail storefronts. This year, there's 902. That's a 90% reduction. Not only that, there's illicit and illegal storefronts. There's an estimated 1,000 illegal storefronts just in LA County. Next slide. So why aren't there enough retail outlets? Local control has the limit on this. Most retail is put into zoning that's limited in the jurisdictions. There's a high cost of entry that impedes the transition of these retail stores from the traditional market to the legal market. And that high cost is further impeded because we don't have access to banking. We don't have access to traditional loans that new entrepreneurs would typically have access to. And that's why we're asking for tax reform now. Taxes along the state and local levels are flat, it's regressive, and it doesn't change with the dynamic markets that we have. We're an agricultural crop. There's boom years and bust years, and our tax implication does not reflect that. High taxes and fees have caused a resurgence in the illicit market. We've not been able to eliminate illegal farms. And we're here to ask you, how do we help you do that? We're willing. They impact us greatly. And quite honestly, legislation has not kept up with the pace of commerce. This is a quick, fast-moving industry. It's changing monthly, and it's hard. We all know government is a slow process, not one that's easily changed because it takes a lot of input to make things happen, and we appreciate that. Next slide. And I'm going to let Erin talk about the state of cannabis in Lake County.
Thanks, Jen. So yeah, really excited to give you guys an update on what's going on. Many of you know, and you're all involved, there's cannabis in each district. And since the ordinance was passed, since it was implemented in 2018, there's been over 100 projects in Lake County, generating over $16 million that has been spent on environmental protection, law enforcement, and the special district projects, which is really, we're really happy that those funds were put aside for each district to have the discretionary funding there. There are currently 292 acres that are active and in license, and then another 848 that are proposed or pending to go to the Planning Commission. That's about 1140 acres in the entire county. To put that in comparison, it's about 10% of other agricultural crops that are about 11,000 acres in our county. In addition to cultivation, which we hear about a lot, there are two other ordinances, Clear Lake and Lakeport, and we have other industries, other business types, such as 6 dispensaries. 4 are operational right now, 2 pending, 2 micro businesses, 2 dispensaries or distributions, and 2 processing. So next slide, please. And so many questions come up as people go before the Planning Commission and as we're out in the community. One of them is generally, what is the demand and price per pound for Lake County flower? This slide shows the pre-legalization, 1 year after implementation of Prop 64 and the current price. You can see the dramatic drop from $1,400 per pound in 2016 to about $400 per pound in 2020. This is for sun-grown cannabis, 2022. And so why are people still waiting in line? Why is there a big queue to get licensed? Well, a lot of people have already paid the application fees to get in line at Lake County. They've paid the applications fees at the state. That can be up to $50,000 there. Some people just really have a personal passion for it. They want to grow cannabis. They love it. They maybe have a medicinal need for it. And they have market optimism. This might not be the case for the future. $400 pounds, it will probably go up and even out. And if you do your business models right based on these informations, you actually have a pretty good chance of being successful. Next slide, please. Another question that comes up a lot is about odors, right? So one of the things is, will the smells of the cannabis impact other agricultures or impact other people? That smell is caused by terpenes, and terpenes are found in numerous fruits and vegetables, such as lemons, grapes. If you've ever smelled a rotting cantaloupe, you've smelled a terpene. So the Santa Rosa Community College actually did a study that said that it will not have any effect on neighboring crops. Next slide, please. Water usage. The last presentation was fantastic, and happy to go on the heels of that because our industry is very passionate about being involved in the larger conversation of water conservation. We just had a regenerative farming discussion about this that is going to, really talk about how do we make sure that we're stewards of the land. And as you can see on this chart, cannabis is actually not the biggest water user. And in terms of acres in California, it's an itty-bitty dot compared to like the other acres. But we want to look at how we use the facts and work together to create enough water usage for future generations. Next slide, please. One concern that's coming up too, and something that people might be looking at, is that the taxation, right? That reducing the cultivation tax or suspending the cultivation tax will cut enforcement for illegal grows. And as seen by the city of Long Beach, when they opened up their ordinance and created more pathways for a diversified cannabis industry, their tax base went up, which was able to fund all of the social services and the police department. There's also $8 billion in illegal sales. So if we can help eliminate those illegal sales, that $8 billion goes into the legal market, which will still sustain the ability for sheriffs and social services to have a budget. And in addition, we cannot actually eliminate the cultivation tax. We can change it to a dynamic model, as Jen was talking about, where it's maybe a percentage of sales, but a flat tax of $161 when our price per pound is $400 is a little tough. Next slide.
Oh, hold on, Erin. On the bottom of that graph,
Oh, geez, yeah.
sorry, did I scare you?
Yes.
If you could go back, I can't read what the bottom of the bars are.
Oh, that's it's state cannabis tax in blue and local cannabis tax in green. And then it says Colorado State, Washington State, Oregon, Alaska, Nevada, California, Massachusetts, and Maine. And then it just has a couple caveats saying that our California state tax is 25%, but local cannabis tax can vary widely.
Okay.
It doesn't include, yeah. So in summary, from what Jen was talking about in the state and what I mentioned with the county challenges, you can see the challenges here that we've mentioned before. And one of the things that we've talked about again is how do we help eliminate the competitive black market. This is something that Sheriff Martin noted when they busted a recent illegal grow in the Oaks, saying that the operations adversely impact the legal industry, they have a negative impact on our environment, and they do increase other illegal activities. So as we combat all of these, we want to also make sure that we're working with all agencies in Lake County. Next slide.
So what are we doing at the state level? Currently, there are 4 assembly bills that have been proposed. The LCCA will be supporting one. We're not sure exactly which one yet, but I can tell you we will be supporting one that is not net neutral. Moving the tax burden, thank you, to the consumer is just not fair. And again, will limit access and increase illicit market activity. Next slide. So as you can see, local municipalities are taking tax reform into their own hands while we wait for the state to take action, and hopefully we see that this summer. Next state. On the left, you'll see a list there of municipalities that have asked the state and signed on to the resolution to suspend the cultivation tax. And then you'll see also what actual local municipalities have already done. We know what we've done here in Lake, and we're very appreciative of the delay in payment and the removal of the penalties. Sonoma County has voted to postpone their first quarter. Humboldt County, as we know, has reduced their cultivation tax to 15 cents a square foot. Monterey County has voted to stop the fiscal year increases up till 2028. Calaveras County just reduced their canopy-only tax to 60%. And in Mendocino County, they have a case-by-case scenario where each project is vetted to see what kind of tax relief they need. Next slide. Local tax form priorities from our perspective. We are the only municipality that charges on a cultivation site. Every other county and the state taxes upon the canopy area. Changing this would align us with the state, and it would create parity with other counties. We're asking for tax relief for the 2021 bill that is still outstanding. We're asking for tax reduction for 2022. We'd like one that is competitive with other cultivation regions. And I know we're going to talk about this later, so we're keeping this broad. We'd like tax reform for all cannabis businesses as well, not just cultivation. While a majority of us do speak from the cultivation standpoint, it's important to acknowledge that we have other businesses that need some relief as well. And then lastly, we would like to look at and model a gross receipts tax and see what that looks like for the county. Next slide. So where do we go from here in terms of an ordinance? We would love to be considered a stakeholder and to participate in the drafting of Article 73. There are many members that have experience in drafting ordinances, and we're here as a resource for you. We'd like to align local regulations with state regulations. We'd like to distinguish the different uses between hoop houses and get some terminology. We talked about water just a few minutes ago. There's reports out there that using hoop houses just as crop protection, not as light manipulation, can reduce water usage by 25%. And I think that this is a great area where we can make some changes and really impact. Early activation, let's find out where I know Mary had a great presentation on it. Where do we really stand with that? What are the requirements? Is it going to move forward? And we would love to be a part of creating a permitting pathway to temporary and permanent dry structures. This will allow Lake County to get their product from seed to sale, really, to finish the growing and cultivation cycle that's much needed. We'd like to be a part of re-examining zoning restrictions. There's been some interesting chatter about why are we putting cement pads on prime ag land? We've had meetings with the Autobahn, and their concerns are very well received, and it would be great to explore this. And we want to explore the possibility of moving to minor use permits rather than major use permits. Granted, this is a wish list, but it's things that we would like to be a part of the discussion as we move forward. And as we move forward, there's a lot of opportunity in Lake County. Who doesn't want to be the Napa of cannabis? We have that ability. We have the lake. We have tourist attractions naturally. We want to be seen as more than just a cultivation region. There's cannatourism, as you can see from the slide. Mendocino is knocking it out of the park, but it's a little more difficult to get to. So why not make Lake a destination? A facilities ordinance would allow us to have tasting rooms. It would allow us to have on-site consumption. We could have cannabis hotels. We could have cannabis spas. This way we would be expanding the tax base that you would be receiving rather than relying on just cultivation. And again, it would allow business diversification in different zones. Next slide. So the one thing I did want to chat about quickly is how policy, planning, and planting align with one another. It's the winter right now. People are planting their gardens, and if they're even going to plant. So we are hoping that we can address the local tax reform, which obviously we're going to do today. Updates on the county permit processing, sorry. People are still in the queue. and still waiting to find out if they're going to be able to plant today. These are decisions that take time and need to be planned for in the winter. And then also, if we are going to make some changes to the way we tax things, there's going to be farms that want to remodel their farms. Is there a pathway to that modification? In the spring, it's important that we start talking about these dry structures that there's been a lot of chatter of. How do we get permanent or temporary dry structures so that we can finish the crop cycle? And how do we work together to update Article 73? In the summer, an ideal time to work on the future. Let's deal with what's immediate right now and time sensitive. And then this summer, while we're all planted, would love to talk about how do we get that facilities ordinance? How do we get people here to come and stay, enjoy Lake County, and see the beautiful cannabis it produces, but everything else that Lake County has to offer. At that time as well, hopefully we can talk about cannabis business tax reform. Let's see what's happening with our dispensaries and our processing centers. And then in the fall, it's always looking ahead to the next year. And where do we go from here and how do we remain partners? Next slide. Ultimately, what we're here for today is to talk about the vision for the future. How do we work together and make Lake County the Napa of cannabis? We have the opportunity. We have beautiful cultivation. The Emerald Diamond. It's been said, let's make it the Emerald Diamond, not the Emerald Triangle. So let's exploit's not the right word, but let's embrace it, and let's embrace what we have here in Lake County and work together. With that, I'm super stoked for discussion. Thanks.
Any comments from the board? Supervisor Sabatier.
Since no other pen seems to be going up, I know a while ago we changed it as a board to allow for the, if I'm gonna say it correctly, the micro business capability for somebody out doing a resort, that they have the ability to have their own dispensary to sell to their clients, because that is the idea, was to make for agritourism or cannabis tourism, where cannabis-friendly resorts could be there. And I see no difference in that capability or a resort that has a bar available to their guests as well. So that definitely could be looked at and reviewed to make sure that it functions appropriately for the development of such facilities. But I think that definitely is the future. Farming is lucrative when it was lucrative. Eventually, ask any farmer how things are. It's a tough struggle to make it through each and every year, and that's what farming cannabis in the future will be. I think that you have high hopes that it might bounce back to 500, or my personal opinion is people are going to find innovative ways to make it grow cheaper, and we'll continue to reduce the price because the competition is going to continue to make that happen. So we'll see which direction it goes. It's a crystal ball situation. You mentioned the total amount of acres currently versus the total of acres that are in the hopper for applications that are still in the process. I'm in absolute support of cannabis in our county, but even that number for me is concerning. It's concerning to the folks that have licenses right now, as to how much more until you get completely overwhelmed and drowned by every other farm able to produce more product, which hence creates more pressure on lowering the cost of how much it costs to buy a pound. And also we haven't been perfect in how it is that we've been doing our things. Our review of the environmental impacts have not been what's the word I'm looking for? Consistent in how they've been reviewed from farm to farm, from location to location. And so I think that from my perspective, that 800 number is worrisome. And I think from the community's perspective, and they see the impacts, are also kind of worried about that. I want the industry to be able to continue to settle here and continue to be prosperous here. But I think it's going to take some pause and release, and some pause and release, and some pause and release to be able to really understand what the true impacts are. I feel bad for the cannabis industry. Unfortunately, you did not create a drought, but you're blamed for it. That's really unfortunate. I think that everybody is part of the issues of a drought, whether people are farming agriculturally, whether people are using water out of their own wells. What we need to do is ensure that we're correctly overseeing how water is going to be utilized in the future. And I won't make it a big discussion, but it's something that I need to bring to the board. To grow cannabis, you have to go through a CEQA process, including how much water you're going to use. But if you're going to have a well and you're going to sell water commercially, you don't have to go through any process. And you can sell 20 million gallons a day if you wanted to, and that is absurd to me, that commercial water selling does not have the same level of scrutiny as somebody who wants to grow a plant. I'm very concerned about that, and it's something that we need to discuss. We have put ourselves on a path where our legislative policies have not been able to protect us from the circumstances we're dealing with today when it comes to a drought. The right to farm is important, but the right to farm to the point that people don't have access to water in their residential wells next door to farms is crucial, that we figure out how to find a middle ground so that everybody can continue to have access to water. I appreciate the presentation, and I don't know exactly what more to say because I don't want to speak too much on policy at this moment in time, especially since we're going to be talking about tax reform in a second. But it's definitely, anytime you go from an illegal market to a legal market, the price drop is a must. It's going to happen. And I don't know that people were intending for it to happen as quickly as it did. And I hope that the state of California is going to resolve some of the problems that allowed for these things to happen, because the metric system is not perfect. People are smuggling stuff into the metric system, and people are smuggling stuff out of the metric system. And that has created a huge pain in figuring out exactly what true legitimate product is in the legal market versus not. And that doesn't, unfortunately, you have bad actors that make cannabis not look very good as a whole. And I appreciate that you're asking us, how do we work together to work against the illicit market, because that is something that we absolutely need to do. And I look forward to how it is that we can do that together, because we shouldn't be afraid. What we should be afraid is of the environmental crisis that these illegal grows are doing and creating in our communities, literally right in our backyard. So thank you again for the presentation.
Supervisor Pyska?
Thanks. So I really appreciate the presentation and the time that you've taken to put this together. When we talk about the market, what the market can bear, and can you talk about the region in our county and the type of product that would come out of our county compared to other counties and competitive regions?
Do you mean, is this off?
Yeah, it's on.
In terms of the quality of the flower or the product itself?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So one of the great things that the state of California and groups that are passionate about the growing of cannabis have created an appellations project. And so Lake County, even within Lake County itself, as we all know from other agricultural products, is the terroir of, and the sunshine, the soil, the slope of the land, everything creates that flavor or end result of a cannabis flower. So we have different appellations in Lake County that are different than Mendocino. Mendocino can get more fog. Lake County is arid. Lake County has volcanic rock. One of our member farms grows through obsidian and has the roots going through that. That's going to create a very unique and different type of flower than somebody who's growing in an ag basin or in, loam. So each one of our flowers has a different taste, and we'll soon find out, actually. So the Emerald Cup that's happening in May this year, many member farms have submitted their product, and they're basing this on terpenes, on a whole profile, on your terroir, on your Appalachia. So we're going to see how Lake County compares to it. But just from anecdotal historical facts, it's very popular. The climate creates a delicious, tight, bud, flavorful flower.
I think it's important to note, and one of the things that,
Yeah. it's
okay,
on me here.
thanks, that was weird. Humboldt, and I don't want to disparage any other growing region, right? But we all know the Emerald Triangle is famous for its cannabis. Let's be honest, it's because people could hide there and grow it. It's not necessarily because it's the best place to grow cannabis. Cannabis is a high desert plant. It loves dry, arid areas, and that's why it thrives so well here in Lake County. And the air quality obviously is the best in the state, and the light lumens, the elevation, everything really adds to the quality product that we can grow here in Lake County.
The other thing, especially as we talk about a tourism ordinance and a facilities ordinance and expanding what we have, the resort ordinance already, to direct to consumer, other things like that, will give an opportunity. You know, so many things in life, it's about the people. And as this room shows, we have an amazing, diverse group of growers who have their own story and would love to have people come visit them and tell their history of growing giant trees or little babies or whatever it is. So we have some really cool growers in here. And to talk on Supervisor Sabatier's point, I wouldn't say cannabis is necessarily blamed for the drought, but I think some of the regulations and some of the reporting has brought awareness. It really, every time we have to go before the Planning Commission and talk about water usage, it's bringing it up for everybody. And living in Clear Lake, those Burns Valley residents, their well was dry long before legal cannabis came into it. So we want to work and find solutions. I don't want my neighbors to be, you know, not showering and not having clean water. So we're looking forward to that conversation.
So one more comment that comes up often, and we received a lot of e-comments on this, is the perception that there's crime involved with the legal grows. And just giving you an opportunity to speak on that.
I don't have the stats, but I do know that if you did check with our local sheriff's office, you would not find that to be true. And it was even noted in the article about the 7,000 pounds that were confiscated by Sheriff's Department and Sheriff Martin. The illegal activity is definitely on the illegal farms. That's where you're going to find not just illegal activity, but crimes against the environment and crimes against humanity. That's where you're going to see people that are living in tents and diverting water. And so it's like, I think that that's a huge misnomer.
Yeah. Well, it seems like everybody's fine with a cannabis grow until it comes to their neighborhood or their area.
100%.
And then we hear about it, and we're, you know, that's the first thing, is we don't want crime happening in our neighborhood. And, you know, so it's, I know, I hear you, and I appreciate you speaking on it. It's just something that we get a lot.
Then how do we work with the Sheriff's Department to get that information released would be my question back. You know, there needs to be a stat out there or facts shared with the community that the crime is not happening on these legal farms. We're not going to jeopardize our licenses for it.
And just for anybody that's listening that may not have an understanding, what are the regulations that you have to, what do you need to have at your site? You have to have everybody fingerprinted and background checked and security cameras, and you just rattle off a few of those just for people that don't have an understanding.
Absolutely. So every employee, every owner of the company, of the farm, is background checked. We get live scans for the employees every 2 years. Ownership is live scanned every 2 years, and that's a Lake County ordinance. At the state level, only the owners are live scanned, so I get to go through it twice. But in Lake County, it's every 2 years. So the county is really on top of criminals getting into our legal market in terms of working and employment. We have security cameras. If you have processing, you have a security camera at every entrance, every door, and on the processing activity. At cultivation, we have cameras that have to cover all the cultivation site as well as any buildings that we're using. And the retention on that is 60 days. We have to have 60 days.
Yeah, and many farms use live guards during cultivation when there might be a higher risk. They have people doing security laps around the area, and many regions will have, they'll go in on a security detail together. And again, you know, to increase awareness and to increase education, we would love to have more community forums to talk about this so they get to meet their neighbor, get to meet their grower. Because as I said, we're parents, fathers, members of the community. So your local neighborhood cultivation isn't as scary as you think it might be. But happy to talk about it.
The one thing that I always tell people, because that's the first question, my family, my friends, oh my God, what do you do about theft? What do you do about security? Nobody wants to rob a legal farm. They're on camera. We can call the sheriff. So that also answers your question about illegal or crime on legal farms.
Great, thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier?
You mentioned retail, and that is something, again, that I just want to bring up, that I have concerns with how we're moving forward with retail. One concern is the disparity between, if you're in C2, it's an automatic allowable use if there's a building that exists. If you're in C1, you have to go through a major use permit. Like, there seems to be such a discrepancy of the process for the exact same thing, with a definition of commercial that is very much not too dissimilar to one another. And so that to me is strange. I wouldn't mind seeing both married somewhere along the middle. But what was concerning was when I did some research, and I'm asking you a question here to see if maybe you know. I saw something that I wasn't aware of. It looks like in September of 2021 that the state so we don't have any regulation whatsoever when it comes to retail at the local level, which I know that when we passed it up, I was hoping that we can do something similar to what the city of Clear Lake does. I like that, minimize the number. I know some people aren't very happy about that, but I appreciate that, so that we don't have a whole bunch of new dispensaries popping up, so that eventually they can fail and we can have more vacant commercial buildings. I'd rather see some separation and some more planning than just allowing a free-for-all. So we don't have any regulations. The state had regulations, but it appears to me that in September 2021, unbeknownst to me, that the state changed their regulation, which looks like it even crosses out the setbacks from schools and other things as such. I'd like to find out if that's the case, because if it is, that's a little concerning to me, very concerning to me, because I always expected that you're supposed to have a setback from schools or from other things. I don't know if it's written somewhere else and that it still covers it, but it doesn't appear when I look up the law right now, and the health and, not the health and safety code, but the business code, that it is there any longer.
I'm gonna let Chris speak to this since he is actually a dispensary owner.
Hey everyone, Chris Jennings. I don't know the law you're speaking of, Bruno, but I'm pretty certain that they had state guidelines where it's like minimum setbacks were put in place, but it's the municipality that can actually change those. So if you had a dispensary opening up and it was 10 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet from a school, and it's like, yeah, the state guidelines say this, you guys are allowed to say it's okay, even if it's contested and appeal it and everything else. I'm almost positive it comes down to the local jurisdiction. It's up to you guys ultimately what it comes down to. The state kind of put out their guidelines of what they wanted, 600-foot setbacks from schools, parks, all these other things that they had in place. My understanding when I talked to my attorneys, Lauren Mendelson, Omar Figueroa Law Group, it's I don't think you can there's certain change. Man, I'm trying to remember this. Sorry, just forget what I just said. But I'm almost positive you guys can, override and allow,
100% that the local jurisdiction can supersede and make it more stringent. But it appears to me, because I found a text where it was crossed off and I could see where it said 600-foot setback. And it's just to let you know so you can look into it. It's section 15025 of the California Code. Code of Regulations, Title 4, and it was very concerning to me to see that is gone and we don't have anything, which in turn means we have to have something, in my opinion, quickly, unless there's something else in the code that I'm not finding. So I just thought I'd ask the question since you were talking about and requesting, saying that part of the fix is more retail.
I thought the county, this also speaks to the importance of our conversation and communication with county staff and the ordinance. I thought we limited it to 2 per district.
No, we talked about that.
Okay.
I know that I brought that up and that was not the case.
Okay.
But if you look at the section code of C1 and C2, it just says allowable use for C2 and permitted through a major use permit for C1, but zero details as far as what we expect more than from the state regulations. And again, as I understand it, it looks like the state regulations may have changed.
Yeah, I guess I was looking at an old ordinance. I thought we had to be approved by the supervisor.
Bruno, you might be looking at the regulations that are out for comment now, but currently it does stay at 600 feet. Obviously, municipalities can be more restrictive with that.
I'm going to dig further into
Yeah,
that.
as are we. Everyone's.
That's an important one to me, because I looked at the regulation one directly on the DCC website, and then I looked at what the current code is, and I'm not seeing it in that current code as we speak. So I could be wrong, but it's definitely something that's concerning to me, because we need to make sure that as we plan for where these things are going to happen, that they happen in a very organized way and not just a, let's throw it here and see how that works, because it doesn't work in those zones that are surrounded by things like schools.
Absolutely, hearing you loud and clear and in agreement. I think another point that is very similar to that is the state does not require any security cameras on outdoor cultivation. There's no security requirements whatsoever, and yet, we've got them in place here, and they're restrictive and useful.
All right. It looks like we're through with questions on this end. I'll go ahead and open to public input. If there's anybody in the chambers that would like to come up and speak. Yes, sir. Come on up and state your name for the record.
Hi, Board. Thank you for your time. My name's Tyler. I live in Kelseyville. Thank you so much for the presentation. Just a friendly reminder that I think as far as how the industry should be regulated, I think everything that's needed is in the Food and Ag Code. And unfortunately, we were shoved into the Business and Professions Code, which kind of creates this whole mess of nonsense that doesn't really apply to an agricultural product. So it's really already there in the Food and Ag Code. And according to in regards to retail access, yes, keep it away. Retail probably has a place in the Business and Professions Code, but the rest of the industry it's pretty simple as far as it's an agricultural product, it's a commodity, and it really should be regulated. I mean, I know we can't really get there, but that's really, the framework's already there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think one of the reasons that it was placed there and is seen as such is the ability to tax it makes it very difficult when you start truly calling it real agriculture. And in order for the state to be able to do the excise tax and the cultivation tax, it was a whole lot easier to call it a quasi-agriculture.
For sure. I mean, the state, the county, the cities, they all need their tax money. We totally get that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Chris Jennings, all the discussion today, definitely, there's a lot of things that need to happen, but at the end of the day, the core problem is the farmers are trying to survive, and I think we just not need to get too far out with all these other, and I'm not trying to sound mean or rude towards presentations or thoughts or anything like that, but the problem is pound prices are where they're at. Bruno's right, they're not coming back. The amount of weed coming in the system's crazy. Both on the white market and the black market. People don't want outdoor grown cannabis. They want greenhouse, they want commercial indoor. I think we need to look at the long-term impact of this and asking, 50% off our tax bill for the next year, then 25% off is, we're just gonna be back here again next year asking for the same thing. So I think we need to find something that's gonna work in the long term, so this is not a constant thing coming up and coming back to you guys and asking for help when we're just like, we just did this a year ago and we're back again, and finding some sort of common ground on that. Just an idea on pound prices. I get all the fun wholesale lists from all types of businesses from being vertically integrated. Mad Cow Genetics is an indoor grower. They do really good indoor work when it comes down to it. Their pound prices are generally pretty expensive when you're buying in bulk. Just got their email the other day. Pound prices from Mad Cow, who does a lot of contract grows for cookies and all these other big bougie names. It's $1,400 and $1,500 a pound. I'm sure the guys behind me and the girls behind me don't realize that. That's what the prices are, but that's just a year ago, it was, $2,800 a pound. Now we're down to $1,400, $1,500 a pound. And so I just think without getting too caught up in all the other things that are going on, I mean, yeah, we definitely need processing. There is a way to bring in an ag exempt building and get power ran to it. You got to talk with the ag commissioner. There is ag code to allow that to happen on a minor use permit, depending on the size. These things can happen. So we need to focus on these things. Facilities for people to dry in to help alleviate the cost of processing, the taxes, and then look on the other things. I feel like too many times we get caught up with how big the picture really is and all the parts that are to it that need to be changed. And what we need to do is certain things need to happen now and focus now. And that's the taxes and that's the overhead and that's everything else. And so if there's things that we can really focus on, it'd be tax breaks of some sort or a tax structure that makes sense for the industry that we're in that's not coming back anytime soon, and being able so we can process our product, because it takes so much money to get things processed, dried, and prepared to go to market. It just eats into your overhead so much. And I think there's just two things that we can focus the most on is how can we get buildings for people to dry in. I know we got ag exempt buildings. I know everyone likes to say you're not allowed to work in an ag exempt building, but how does everyone package all the pears that come out of Lake County in the buildings, and the taxes at the same time? So let's just focus on the important things, and then let's get those taken care of and moved on to, the next set of items on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Ma'am? If you state your name for the record as well.
Hi, I'm Kristen Callahan. I have a farm in Middletown. I also agree with Mr. Jennings about the fact that we're in an all-time market low. Last week, we put together a little workshop, and I was kind of understaffed and couldn't get you guys a Zoom link, but I had planned to and spoke to Bruno and EJ about coming to this event to sort of understand a little bit about our cannabis culture, which I think is kind of missing in a lot of these common presentations. I think the culture really needs us to really step outside of what's easy to talk about and just really focusing on how we're going to get all of our farmers to be able to get money up front so they can continue growing. Most of the issues that we're facing are that we're waiting to get paid. Retail's great, but it doesn't actually work for the farmer. A farmer that's producing over 1,000 pounds of cannabis cannot just sell to retail. They have to sell to bulk wholesale buyers that come in and collect the product in a large amount to get money so that we can actually continue, pay our taxes, do these things that we need to do to continue growing. So in my opinion, and I would love to be part of this conversation, though I haven't been. I'm not affiliated with any government group. I'm myself, and I'm just a family and a community member. I support education, regenerative agriculture, stepping outside the boxes of using imported soil. I use native soil. I'm in a basaltic, volcanic soil type in a terroir that makes beautiful flower with very little fertility needed. So I'm in a water conservation space, and I'm also speaking from a person who's lived in this community and been a part of a lot of organizations to help community members. Officially, the problem is being able to get wholesale for farmers up front, and we can do this with a community-supported agriculture structure that we've used in other agricultural models, and that's the CSA. I really feel like our county could be the leaders. We have always been the leader in agriculture since the beginning. This is the spot to grow cannabis. We moved here because of this terroir, because of this environment. I feel like our industry needs our support in the producer side. The retail side is much more like a business in the Business Professions Code. It kind of matches that in the zoning and everything. But for a producer, an agricultural product, we need to focus on how we can get direct sales up front for farmers. The Wood Bill is a really fantastic bill to read. It's about direct farmers markets, which would actually increase local economy. It would be an economic strategy that we could actually fulfill in this region very easily and effectively. I'd love to talk about it more, but I know my time's up. I just wanted to let you know that I'm 100% on board for education and outreach and finding a way for farmers to actually get their money up front. And I'm working on a presentation currently, and I'd love to pass that along to all of you. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time and consideration.
Thank you.
Michael Donegan. All the presentations and basically the whole of the talking today is kind of targeting the future. And we're talking about, okay, let's open dialogue, let's do this, let's do that, and everything, to me, in my opinion, is kind of like something that might or might not happen in the next 5 months, 6 months, a year. So I would like to hear from you guys some kind of guidance, precise guidance of what's going to happen in the next 25 days, 30 days. It's mid-March already. So we start planting in April, and we have to start budgeting. I don't know what taxes I'm going to be needing to pay. Is it going to be May 1st? Is it going to be July 1st? Anything. It's just everything is up in the air.
Mr. Donahue, we're talking about that a little later on item 7.3, what you're asking for.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Do you agree? Yeah.
I'm just going to say some closing comments from the presentation. We appreciate the time. There hasn't been a lot of public dialogue on cannabis in a while. And I think our point in receiving the invitation and accepting the invitation to come speak today was a broad picture on cannabis. We know that there's challenges, and we're going to be talking about those challenges later. But we're hoping that, dialogue like this can be more frequent, so that it doesn't appear that we're coming at the last minute for tax reform relief, and that we're coming at the last minute to scream about hoop houses when it's September for drying, temporary dry structures. So hopefully this is the start to regular and consistent conversation as we move forward. And let's obviously, as Michael says, deal with what's urgent now. And we know what that is, and we're going to do that later today. But I just want to echo my gratitude and thanks for the opportunity to have actual back and forth conversation today.
Thank you. We do have one person on Zoom that has their hand up. Blue Rion, if you can unmute.
Hello.
If you could state if that's your name, please state it for the record so we can have it on
Hi.
on the minutes.
My name is Blue Ryan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm not sure who was speaking about this. I don't know your names. I'm sorry. But I just wanted to touch on what one of the supervisors was saying about the price not necessarily going up for outdoor. I completely agree. And I think that also there's a really good point made about there needing to be a more permanent solution, just delaying taxes, cutting it by 50% this year, 25% next year. That's really not sustainable, because in reality, the more people get into cannabis, the more plentiful the product is. I don't think we're not going to see prices go back up to, legacy market prices. And that's fine. But what we need to do is have a tax.
We're talking about taxes actually probably coming up in the next couple of items, so we'll be talking more about that. I know a lot of people want to talk about the tax. That's on the agenda today. So if you can just, in closing, talk about the presentation and maybe some other words that you had.
Okay, well, I think that my comment more relates to tax, so I will wait.
It will be.
Thank you.
It'll be shortly coming up.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks. Next, Nara Dalbaka. If you can unmute, you have 3 minutes, and let's try to keep it to the presentation if at all possible. We'll be talking about tax reform and all of the other things later, so.
Of course, yeah, thank you. We are, a lot of the discussion today, especially in the presentation, involves sort of waiting on the state to act on a couple of things, but there was a really great section on the ability for the county to diversify in terms of the tax base in the county, and that was the slide that talked about the work to be doing this summer. The exciting thing about that is there may be a way to have that happen quickly and have that happen on the ground for this harvest for these farmers if if this process was a simple AUP and the process was adopted quickly, then the county could count potentially on that tax base this fall, this winter, for doing simple micro businesses or vertical integration at existing farms to allow for delivery of product direct to consumer from those farms. The county would then get to grow the tax base with the existing farmers and grow the wealth for the existing farmers. So the faster you can make that available on the ground, and there are mechanisms in under current state law that would allow that to happen. So I'm really happy to talk to anyone about that. Trinity is a great example of a county that looks a little bit like Lake and has fantastic tourism, or has at least a growing tourism industry in cannabis. And so between that and the facilities ordinance that LCCA brought up today in Mendocino, there are some fantastic opportunities. A lot of folks here have beautiful farms on beautiful properties and would love to share their regenerative farming techniques with tourists. And Lake is in a fantastic position for that because of the quality and the unique terroir that we have here. So I just wanted to answer Supervisor Pyska's question on crime. So there is data that shows that around dispensaries, crime actually decreases, and that's going to be similar around legal grows as well. It's the eyes on the street argument. So there's a lot of eyes and a lot of at a very good resolution camera that's required on grows, and I know the data is there for dispensaries. I can try to track that down. On the setbacks issue, I believe counties can reduce setbacks. The city and county of San Francisco reduced setbacks to 0, but I think that was for non-storefront retail. But they did make it very clear that it's existing public or private K-12 schools that fall into the 600-foot boundary for retail. So they were able to keep it very narrow on the 600 feet, but they did reduce setbacks to 0 for several kinds of businesses. So I know that can happen. Thank you so much for taking this up today, and appreciate your thoughtfulness and the questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Julia Jacobson. If you can unmute, you have 3 minutes, and then I see, gentlemen, you're... Okay.
Hi, this is Julia Jacobson, CEO, co-founder of Astor Farms. Thank you, supervisors, for the time today and for opening up this conversation. And thank you to the LCCA for the comprehensive presentation today. We agree in full to all of the points made. I just wanted to bring up a note in regards to some of the supply chain dynamics and how they are affecting the economics of this market. And it's something that isn't talked about as much. And I just wanted to put it on your radar. In the overall industry across California, there is a problem with collection from accounts receivable from retailers. Because retailers are not paying brands, that collection problem begins to trickle down. That trickles down to the cultivators who grow in Lake County. That trickles down to the processing companies who process in Lake County. It trickles down through the entire industry. Obviously, there are reasons for that include excise taxes, market dynamics in terms of competition. There are lots of reasons why retailers are struggling to pay, but it is a very serious problem that is trickling down and affecting the economics of the entire industry. In the alcohol industry, there is a check and balance on this. And I think it is, potentially wise to look at other high taxed and high regulated industries when it comes to some of these checks and balances. In the alcohol industry, a license holder at the retail level, if they are significantly late on their payments to their vendors, their license is put in suspension. I know that in New York, as New York is starting to unfold their regulations regarding cannabis, they are considering implementing these regulations regarding retail. So as you continue to consider the retail regulations in Lake County and how all of these pieces of the puzzle affect the entire supply chain and therefore the industry, I just wanted to bring this up and bring this to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, if you could state your name for the record, you have 3 minutes.
My name is Michael Wegner. I'm here once again with you nice folks, and I wanted to start off obviously by thanking Aaron and Jen for all their hard work, and then the board for bringing this up in conversation, to have an actual conversation, because I think, as Bruno remembers, sometimes there wasn't much of a conversation before, so it's awesome to be to this point. In relation, I think directly to the question about security and crime, I can speak to that to a certain amount of personal experience, being on an ad hoc committee in Sonoma County, where we sat with the sheriff, the head of community development, the mayor. Everybody really came together, and this was early 2010 when Mr. McGuire was still in Sonoma County as a supervisor, and he was a part of that conversation too. But what they found in areas where there was legal cannabis operations is that crime actually dropped by 20%, 20 to 25%, because there's increased security. Right? And then obviously people are protecting their assets, which is whatever operation they have. And so they're actually diligently looking for people who shouldn't be there, looking diligently for what would be a crime. So it has actually the opposite. Instead of increasing the crime, it actually drops crime, which is an important thing that I think you can probably find that statistic with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department if you're interested. You know, I think the bigger picture here, because there's a lot of different things that have been touched on, the ability to get through or work on the things that do already exist in the county, meaning the applications that are waiting. There are modifications to a lot of these, or they're asking for modifications because they maybe put the application in 2 years ago. Or maybe they've had it for a year and realized that they have to make adjustments. So in talking to Andrew, he made it very clear that things that would have been considered minor adjustments before are now going to be requesting or requiring a new application. And so that in itself throws a major hinge-pin into how this all operates and how you're able to evolve with the industry. That would be it leaves you in a really hard place when you're stuck doing something that you don't necessarily want to be doing because you can't let go of that application. That's an issue. The issue as far as an agricultural commodity, or based on how the tax codes get laid out, you know, you guys as a board have the ability to make those adjustments that maybe the state did not take into consideration, and now make those adjustments so it is workable in this county. The other thing I'd like to just mention quickly is that you know, the industry itself will nationalize. It will become nationally illegal to have cannabis. So again, please try and keep the bigger picture of what's going on here across the nation, and not just be stuck in this California bubble where maybe you make these rules pertaining just to here and now and not take into account 5 years from now. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Good morning, Supervisors, Board. Thank you so much for your time today. We certainly sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much to the LCCA, Aaron and Jen, for your comprehensive presentation. I believe that this dialogue is long awaited, and we really appreciate it. Just to keep everything broad, because we do have more items on the agenda, I would just like to stress, first, I'm Christina with Stella Green Farms, I apologize. Sustainability, I believe, is obviously our theme, and to keep everything very broad for our community in order to continue to go forward and work together and build together. We need sustainability, and this dialogue is the first step to all of us getting together and understanding each other, our roles, and what we bring to the table, and what we can all work together to build together. Sustainability is definitely the theme that I'd like to stress, and what I'm here for to express with our community. We obviously need some triage steps in order to get to the beautiful future that we all have waiting for us when we work together. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to speaking in the future on more itemized agendas.
Thank you. Supervisor, I'm going to go ahead and close public input. I don't see any other hands up or anybody coming to the microphone, so I'll close public input. And Supervisor Sabatier?
I think that there's a subject that's already been discussed a little bit here at the Board of Supervisors, and that's the dry sheds. I think that it's great if we can solve whatever needs to be solved so that people decide to put plants in the ground this year, but how do they dry and I'm making up a number, but the large majority of the people who are growing are drying illegally. And we're not, I worked with admin. Admin was in charge at that moment in time of CDD. We tried to figure out a way to create the rules and regulations that would fit for an industry's needs. And we failed. We failed to make that happen. And what did people do? They did what they needed to do in order to finalize the process of their 4 or 5 months worth of work. We have to create something. If you can come in here and prop up a circus tent and have generators and a tent up for a week or so, how can we not figure out how to allow our farmers to dry the products that they created? There is no future at all with this unless we want to continue ignoring the fact that it's being done illegally if we don't figure out what that regulation is. And it shouldn't just be a simple grab it out of the hat. It needs to make sense. It needs to fit correctly. It needs to be safe, and it needs to be environmentally sound. But that is definitely one of the things that has been brought up again today, that has been brought up to us before. We dealt with it with the appeal last time, and it's still going to be a problem. And we, again, should not be turning our cheek to that. We need to face it forward, head on, and fix that problem. Because it's a part of the process, and we have made it very arduous to make it even possible at all. Getting the use permit is one thing, but then getting your building permits, unfortunately, I think we made a mistake with our early activations because obviously we were forcing people saying, hey, you can grow, but you can't dry. That was not very good forward thinking on our end. So I think the early activation doesn't work when it comes to that concept. But those who have a use permit, how many have actually been able to provide a dry shed of their own? I know we talk about processing, and it's possible, but even the work right, I don't think is processing anyone else's product. I think they're processing their own product. And I think that the liability of drying someone else's product is so high that I would love to see a processing plant that's more of a centralized process for multiple farmers, but I haven't seen that at least yet here in this county being attempted. But then that's where it comes back to, if we can't get a centralized place, then that means the farmers are doing it themselves, and we don't have that regulation that allows them to do so at this moment in time, and we need to make sure and put it in writing so that we can go ahead and follow it.
Supervisor Price?
Well, I think we have that opportunity because we're looking at the ordinance. That's what CDD is working on, and that's going to come before us within a month. And so we've had that discussion, and we're going to open that dialogue up when she brings us what she's put together.
Vice Chair Scott?
I agree. I agree with the fact that we have all these outstanding permits wanting to move forward, and we don't have policies in place for the drying. So I think we definitely needed to stop and look at that. It's hard to move forward with the permits that we have, knowing that we do not have things in place to make sure that this product can get through everything that it needs to get through. So I'm really struggling with this, and I'm happy that it's going to be coming to us in a month to have this full conversation, making sure that when a business goes into business, that they know where this product's going to be going and how they're going to be drying it. I think that needs to be part of the process of permitting, is when you're going to grow, what's that going to look like? Where are you going to dry? I think we need to know as a county where that's going to be done or how that's going to be done before they start growing. I think that's just, goes back to business 101. When you open up a business, you need to know how things are going to be working before you
How are your
start.
customers going to park if they're coming to your store? It's the same basic concept.
Supervisor Sabatier, go ahead.
And I'm going to go back to that 800 acres that are still in the hopper, and in my opinion, coming out of this, we need to come back with a limitation of what is our maximum number of acres before we say pause, so that we can stop and see how this actually truly plays out. both for the industry and for our community, not just for one specific side of the coin. And I don't know how to deal with that, with the fact that those applications have been turned in, but I know that continuing towards that 1,100 mark makes me very nervous without really taking a look at how has this truly impacted and adding even our water tables. Because yes, it's a small amount in comparison to what we have for wine grapes. We have about 9,900 acres, or approximately 10,000 acres of wine grapes, but it's an additional use. It's not necessarily replacing the wine grapes, and so it's adding more pressure on our water tables. So that's something else that I'd love to see come back to this board is where's our threshold where we say time out? Let's see how this works. And review our data and then decide if we're going to keep moving forward or if we're stopping. Because right now, there is nothing that prohibits that other than a no from our planning commission.
And I think right now we're seeing we might have already reached our threshold when they aren't able to dry the product that they're growing, and we've been told they weren't able to sell the product that they grew. So if we're already at the point where we can't sell the product that we grew, I'm not fully understanding why would we want to continue growing double the amount of product than we did last year.
I might be.
Thank you. Mary did speak on this at the presentation, which is why she put together all those graphs and pictograms to show, how many grows we have in the different watersheds, how many we have in each district, what size they are. We have small, medium, large. And that is something that we discussed at length many times in the committee, which has now been dissolved. So that is absolutely going to be one of the things that we address. The question is always sustainability of the market, sustainability, what can our environment sustain? All of those questions, we just need to table for another month or so until we open it up and have those workshops.
I just don't want it to be a surprise to this industry that might be a direction that we're going. Just wanted to put my opinions out there.
And I suggest we go in that direction earlier than a month. A month is to have a greater conversation, but if we allow things to keep happening, then we're only allowing things to exacerbate while we wait for another conversation, which is to change the ordinance so people can submit more applications. I don't know. I'm in my opinion, we need an urgency ordinance.
Well, we've done so many things piecemeal. This is our opportunity to look at it all together, collectively, the greatest impact. And that's what that department's been working on for many months. And, to have an urgency ordinance in the middle of an urgency ordinance that we may have to extend anyway because we're looking at the ordinance. Like, we have to just have this conversation all at once. And it will take time, and it will take us that time, but we need to invest that time and have that conversation all at once with all of us in the room.
I think, too, this is just the result of growing pains of this whole situation. When we initialized this back in 2018, a lot of it was initially mitigated to, in essence, compromise opposing viewpoints. There was a lot on the table at the time with opposition, and so to kind of get this thing with its foot in the door, a lot of things were overlooked, like what we're dealing with now. These things that are popping up they are exacerbating, and I don't know how that looks, but I think that we do need to make these changes, and hopefully it does happen a little sooner. I'd hate to push back another year with a lot of obstacles. I don't like challenges for. It feels like sometimes, and it's not by anyone's design, I truly see that, but at times that things are overlooked and people are hindered because of some of these rulings, and then we get put into a situation where the department gives a direction, and then the department changes and we're back at where we're at. So right now we have some consistency where we can actually make some changes and moves so that we can actually provide synergy rather than a compromise. I'd rather have synergy because then we can move forward from there out. But I don't know, that's all I have to say on that.
I mean, I would hate to put her on the spot, but we could just ask Mary for a refresher on what her timeline looks like.
For myself, I think we're in this position that we're in right now because we did rush things. We're like, we need to do it now, we need to do it now, we need to do it now. I think we need to give Mary the time to properly do the work that she's been tasked to do and not rush her to get it done any faster, because that's when we do overlook things or there's unintended consequences in our ordinances. So I think we need to stop, reset, and let her give her the time to do the work that she can.
I'm confused. We have a market that's crashing, a drought that's a 1,200-year drought, and pausing, the application process doesn't pause what she's been working on. It just pauses the potential for an exacerbation of issues within our community and issues within the industry. It doesn't throw a wrench in her wheel whatsoever in what's happening in her department and the review of the ordinance. It just says, we're pausing right now, allowing you to continue, but right now, we're going to allow things to trickle through on each Thursday that there's a planning commission and say, well, we're waiting. And I think that, again, I'm very nervous about that number. And by saying we're waiting, we're also doing nothing.
No, I'm with you with
When we
that.
can
I just
pause.
didn't want to push Mary.
And I'm not trying to
She needs
push.
to come back in 2 weeks.
No, I'm not trying to push that. I'm trying to say an urgency ordinance saying we're pausing rather than allowing it to continue.
Got eyes behind you.
Ms. Grant, it looks like you have something to say. Thank you.
Yeah, well, this is the part of my job I always enjoy because you all give me dirty looks. But the item on the agenda was a presentation, not an action item by your board.
All right. And it looks like we went over it on the discussion for that. So we will go ahead and move forward if there's nothing else.
Sit on that.
So
Yeah,
with that,
She wants you to turn around.
we'll go ahead and close this item. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the work. The discussion is obviously lively, and that's very good too.